Hi, welcome to Plato's Cave, your speakeasy for ideas, where Tom and Dave show us how to think like the American founders. Grab a drink if you'd like. The conversation about saving our republic is about to begin.
Dave, I'm sitting in my office, but you look like a cool cat in Rick's Cafe from Casablanca. Like I'm expecting you to have a cigar in one hand and a martini or a glass of wine in the other hand. Where are you?
I am sitting in a green room at a really cool venue in Franklin, Tennessee, about 20 minutes south of Nashville. And I'm here actually touring for a pretty exciting announcement we have for the Vino Veritas Society. I'm in a seat right now that I expect in about 7 weeks, you're going to be sitting right here, kind of thinking through your conversation for the evening. We've told a few of our members, but we just made it official in the last 7 to 10 days. We are going to be hosting an event here in the Nashville area. I'm hoping at this venue on July 28th, called Rediscovering America. You're going to get up on stage alongside the infamous Dr. Ben Carson, in partnership with
not the infamous, the famous Dr. Ben Carson.
The famous Dr. Ben Carson, who's actually been on this stage here before. And we're going to be doing this show, Rediscovering America. We're going to be talking a lot about what the American idea was all about. And as you like to say, you're going to fall in love with your country all over again.
Yeah, it's going to be an awesome show. And I mean, what a pleasure and an honor and a treat it is for us to be able to partner with Ben Carson, right? And his whole team and be on a stage together. We're expecting to attract a lot of people probably from all over the country. July 28th, let's make sure we want our members, put that down on your calendar. If you're thinking about where to go for a late summer vacation, hey, how about Nashville, Tennessee? As a place to go and build it around, July 28th and spend an evening with us. We're going to have a lot more information, right, as we clarify here in the coming days, more of the details. But we know it's the 28th. We know that it's going to be in the Nashville area. We know Dr. Carson's going to be on stage with us. And look, we're going to be talking about why Americans really should love their country, why America is worth defending, why it shouldn't be redated, renamed, or fundamentally, what did Barack Obama say? He wanted to fundamentally transform it, into something else. No. It began as something wonderful and beautiful. And what we need to do is reclaim those ideas of the founding, not change them.
You talk about that, and when you talk about reclaiming those ideas, I think back to the very foundation of why we started the Vino Veritas Society. You and I were one day just drawing some pictures on the chalkboard in your office, and for those curious, we will have a chalkboard here at this event. I've been talking to some pretty cool manufacturers here, and we're gonna build an even bigger version of the one that we've been using on stage. But we'd been drawing some ideas and talking through some things, and we drew this graph where we started at the bottom, and some of our members who have been around for a while from the beginning will remember this, but we drew this graph, this chart. And at the bottom, we put 1776. We put the founders. We said, they're down here at the bottom, and we recognize they weren't perfect. They were violating some of their very own universal truths. They were treating people poorly or wrong. They weren't recognizing, respecting the rights of all human beings, the natural rights, the natural law. And they wrote this Declaration of Independence that was all the way up here. And it was a mission statement. It was an idea that said, this is what a good society, this is what America should strive to be. And we made some great strides towards that until the late 19th century, when the progressives forced us on this big left turn away from that. Our goal, starting with the Vino Veritas Society at the beginning, and what we'll continue to push through this event, is turning that ship and trying to trying to turn that ship back towards the ideas of the Declaration, these beautiful, perfect ideas for a great world and a great life.
Yeah, it's interesting when we think about the founders. This sounds so simple, and it is really simple, and yet we tend to forget this, right? Those founders, or even the greatest of them, even the most influential of them, the George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, Hamilton, Adams, all the really famous, our favorite Ben Franklin, who's our sort of our motif at the Vino and Veritas Society.
Right.
Look, all of them were just people. They were, at the end of the day, they were just people. They were human beings. They were not perfect. And I'm gonna say something a little controversial here. In a decisive respect, they were hypocrites. They were saying one thing, and then they were choosing to act in a way that didn't line up. But they were unusual hypocrites in this respect. They acknowledged their hypocrisy. They said, well, we really do believe in these ideas, and we know we're falling short, and we want to get better. We want to improve. We want to improve ourselves. We want to improve
Right.
our policies. We want to improve this nation. We want to try to get closer to those ideas. We want to be less hypocritical. And I say, God bless them for that. What a wonderful thing, right? To recognize your own hypocrisy and try to improve yourselves and try to improve your country. And so they're working toward those principles, those ideas. And you're right, along come the progressives, and the progressives say, oh, you know what's wrong? What's wrong are the ideas. What's wrong are the principles. You got to get rid of those and take a turn towards a centrally planned, scientifically engineered modern society. That's the real path. And I tell you what, Dave, right now, here in the summer of 2022, we are suffering, painfully suffering, what a centrally planned regime, a centrally planned economy looks like, because I mean, we don't even have to talk about it. Everyone knows it. I mean, prices of everything, right, are going out of the roof. Every day you get on social media and it's people, sometimes they're joking and sometimes like they're genuinely distressed because they can barely afford to go fill their car up with gas, and people are now making really hard choices. Am I going to get gas, or am I going to get food? Because I can't get both. And all of these economic problems that we see around us are the result of government policies, of government printing money, government closing down businesses, government restricting and regulating productivity. And the result, look around. This is what a centrally planned economy. This is our progressive paradise. This is as good as it gets right here.
Well, there's a couple of comments I have on that. The first is, you're right about the gas. I just drove to the Midwest. I drove out to Nashville, stopping in Cincinnati along the way. I've put almost 2,000 miles, maybe a little more, on my car in the last week and a half. You can imagine the amount of money I've spent on gas alone, just coming out here, and it's shocking. The funny thing is, you talk about, these are the result of progressive policies, and Joe Biden wants to keep blaming the Russians. He made a fiery speech earlier this week, where he was saying gas has gone up this much, and it's all happened because of Vladimir Putin. I'm gonna push back on the Vladimir Putin part, but it is a little bit about the Russians, right? Because we said a few days ago, or a few weeks ago, we did in a podcast, we are more like the Soviet Union today than we are like America. We are embracing the same ideas. I mean, obviously, a lot of these ideas were born in Germany. They were not born in Russia. But we are much more like the Germans and the Russians today than we are at all like the America that our founders envisioned.
Yeah, I've been using that line a lot. We're more German than American. We're more Russian than American. And for those who don't quite know what we mean by that, this body of knowledge, this new social science of progressivism, it emerged in German universities in the late 19th century, and those German scholars and academics were heavily influenced by fellow German thinkers like Karl Marx and many others. And it turned into strange turn of events, right? The Russians and the Germans end up fighting each other in a terrible, horrific way in World War II. They butcher each other in the millions, and yet they have this affinity for this common kind of social science. And so while Karl Marx was waxing poetically in his books about the phrase that he uses in one of his essays is the withering away of the state. People don't know this about Marx, but real Marxism is a kind of anarchism. He does not describe the future, the communist future. He does not describe it as a totalitarian government. He describes it as no government at all. There won't be a need for government because there will be no source of conflict. Nobody will have anything. Everything will be collective and communal. And so there will be no there'll be no reason to steal. There'll be no reason to wage war. These things won't exist. That's Marx. And then along comes Vladimir Lenin after the Russian Revolution, really sparks the Russian Revolution. He says, well, we're not there yet. And so what we need in the interim, until we get to that communist paradise, we do need a totalitarian government. And he draws heavily from the very kind of social science that the Germans had been perfecting. And all those ideas, you mix them all together, that's American progressivism. So, when I say we're more Russian than we are American, what it really means is we're more Leninists. We're more like Lenin than we
Right.
are like James Madison or Thomas Jefferson. And once you get into that Leninist and Soviet and fascist and Nazi and German way of thinking, you start to see government as the centerpiece of everything. And so the only solutions, you look around and every problem you see, it doesn't matter what the problem is, the only solutions you can even imagine are government solutions. It's always government solutions. And this is what we see from our progressive political class today, the progressive elites. We can assure our members that what progressives are going to be as inflation continues to devalue. This is what inflation really means. It means the money that you have right now, the cash that you have in your pocket, or the money that you've saved up in your savings account, it's worth less. You just can't purchase as much with it as you used to. In fact, inflation right now is outpacing. It's growing faster than increases in wages and salaries. So even though they're getting raises, if you work hard, maybe you get a 2, 3, 4, 5% raise. That a 5% raise in a given year is a pretty respectable, decent raise. It means you've been doing a good job. Well, meanwhile, inflation is going up 8, 9, 10%. And so it means everything is costing far more money than even your raise can account for. So even though you get a raise, you can purchase less. Even though you have more money, you're bringing home more money each paycheck, you can purchase less with that increased amount of money. And when you turn to the political class,
before we dig into that, if I can, before we dig into that too much, I don't want to move on too quickly from this Russian-German connection and the Russian-German philosophy. And I think there's a conversation about the philosophy that we should have a little bit beforehand. And it's funny, you brought that up, and it immediately made me think of a meme I saw just the other day that basically said something to the effect of fascism and communism are not opposites. We've always thought of them as opposite ends of the spectrum, right? But fascism and communism are not opposites. They're two sides of the same coin battling for control. It's just two different means of gaining control over people, and they're not really opposites. And it's interesting that we go into this conversation about Marx saying there should be no government at all, there should be no state at all. It kind of gets into some of the globalist ideas that we're moving towards today, right? Where you don't have nation states, you don't have cities, you have one giant international community. But all of this falls back into Rousseau, and we haven't talked very much about Rousseau in the last several months. And it's a topic you dig into quite well and quite a bit. And I think back to some of the original social contract theories of Rousseau, and the belief in people, and the belief in who people are, how they behave, how they interact with one another, and really this difference between sort of the Soviet interpretation of Marxism, Lenin's interpretation of Marxism, versus the Marx's original words himself, really go to who they each believe people are in their core, right? Are people good? Do they want to come together as a community? Can we exist under an agreed upon social contract where we're all going to do and share everything? And can you trust everybody to uphold their end of the bargain? Or is it Lenin's idea where eventually you're going to have people who are going to get lazy, who aren't going to follow through, who aren't going to be a part of it, who aren't going to want to share, because they say, my hard work earned this, right? The sort of the American idea here.
And from Lenin's point of view, you might have to point a machine gun at him to make him do what you want to do.
And then you need the state to do it.
I'll share with you a very peculiar stage of my life as an undergraduate, I was blessed, and I really mean that. I use that word very purposefully here. I was blessed to have a teacher. He was more than a teacher. He was a mentor. He was a good friend. I spent a lot of time. He wasn't very old. He wasn't that much older than I was. I was I sat out for 2 years before I even started college. So I was an old college student, and he was a very young professor. And he was not one of these great. He was not a great academic scholar. He wasn't writing books that shaped the discipline or things like that. What he was a tremendous classroom presence. To this day, he was the greatest classroom teacher I've ever been around. And we became friends. We used to go there was a little pub right across the street from his office. And on Friday afternoons, we'd go sit down and drink beers, and we'd have open, whether it was Marx or Plato or the Federalist Papers, and we'd be fighting and arguing and, debating this stuff while drinking pitchers of beer. It was glorious. But this guy was a full-blown Marxist. He was a Marxist. He presented himself as a Marxist. He was a devotee of Karl Marx. And when I say I was blessed to have him, I got to read the works of Karl Marx with someone who really took Marx seriously. Like he wasn't looking to just bash on Marx and undermine him. He wanted to dig into this and really see because he thought this is the key to the future, to the world. And so I spent a lot of time reading Marx, studying Marx, writing about Marx. I head out to California for graduate school. And so I've got a lot of Marx on my mind. Now, I'm very skeptical of Marx, but I'm also respectful. I know this mind, Karl Marx, first of all, he's written thousands of pages. He has presented this comprehensive account of all human phenomenon. And he's laid out this plan of how the future is going to go. And I also know, in a practical sense, 2/3 of the Earth's globe people have been persuaded all around the world that we have these huge, powerful Marxist regimes. And so somehow I got on these lists, and I started get invited to these Marxist conferences in California. And I went to some of them. One was at UCLA, one was at Pepperdine. And so I'm going to these, and I remember one in particular. It was a group of, these were scholars and professors in the realm of international relations.
Sure.
But they were all Marxists. I mean, these were honest, thorough, like they weren't hiding it. They would say, yeah, of course, we are disciples of Karl Marx, and that's our purpose in the world. And one of the big things they were debating at one of these conferences was whether or not Marxism requires global Marxism, or whether just a few countries can become Marxist. And the most persuasive argument there, this guy made this argument. He said, well, look, when particular nations start to undergo genuine communist revolutions. Now these guys, right? These are academics, So many of them, for example, they would sort of poo-poo, they would dismiss the Soviet Union. They would dismiss China as not thoroughly, not genuine. Those are communist or Marxist revolutions that have been hijacked, and that it's the old,
Right.
that's not real Marxism argument. But this guy made the argument. He said when nations start to undergo real Marxist revolutions, and there really is no private property, and after a generation, there is no awareness of private property or the individual self or individual liberty. At that point, the state will start to wither away in those nations. But in other nations, there will still be governments, and there will still be, those governments will have armies and navies, and they will be greedy, and they won't be communists, and they're going to want to wage war. And so his argument was the only way you can really have a Marxist future is for it to be global. It has to be the entire human population everywhere has to become Marxist eventually, so that we have the withering away of all states, of all governments. We can live in this communal paradise that is worldwide, that covers the whole earth.
And this goes to the idea of what is human nature, and how do humans like to behave, and how do they, you talk about that Aristotelian scale of God versus beast. What are our instincts? And that was sort of my first introduction to philosophy, was getting into Rousseau's Social Contract, but then sort of this comparison of the Marxist idea of that everybody can get along. If we all just accept that none of us have rights to private property and all of that we can all get along. And then I would read Hobbes and sit there and hear the life in the state of nature is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. And this whole idea that human beings are constantly going to try to be stealing from each other, taking each other's property, regardless of whether it's recognized as private property or not. People are going to have things, right? We have to eat. We have to have a roof over our head. Even if it's a communal roof, somebody's going to say, oh, that person's roof is nicer than my roof. It lets less water leak through, or whatever else it is. And I want to sleep there, not where I sleep, and I'm going to go take it. And we get into that whole idea of human nature. And I bring all of that up because I now taking that into this sort of modern conversation about inflation and where we are now. We talked about this, I think, 2 weeks ago. We need to stop this idea. And I've even heard congressmen say it. I've seen op-eds recently that Joe Biden has no idea how to run an economy. He's too dumb. He's too this, he's too that. That is not the case. This is intentional. This is working towards that Marxist progressive idea of the government knows what's best for you. And eventually you're going to know what's best for you yourself. And we can move into this Marxist future.
Well, I mean, look, if we approach this topic from the point of view of what human nature really is, not the Rousseauist Marxist misconception of human nature, but real human nature, and we begin with the premise that human beings are, number one, they're rational, they can make choices, and by exercising their reason, they come to know not only about the world around them, but also themselves. They become aware of their own self, their own self-interest, and they're going to pursue their self-interest. That's always true wherever you find human beings, anywhere. And whatever my interests are, whatever I value at a given moment, very likely is going to be different than what you value, what your interests are, and then multiply that by millions or billions of other people. We all have different wants and needs at different time. I may not be thirsty at the same time you're thirsty, right? And so there might be a moment when you value a glass of water or a refreshing drink, and at a moment when I don't. And so when these pundits and journalists who have no classical education typically at all, they have virtually no understanding of economics, they're really removed from reality. When they say things like Joe Biden isn't smart enough to run an economy, here's the hard truth: nobody's smart enough. Nobody. The smartest person in the world, whoever that might be, right. Let's say we gave everyone IQ tests and we found the most brilliant mind in the world. That person is not smart enough to run an economy of an entire nation, much less the entire world, for the simple fact that it is impossible for one mind to know what millions or billions of different people want and need and value at a given moment. There's no
Right.
way to know that. And so what happens is the people in charge trying to manage the economy, they think they know, they assume they know what people want, and they say, okay, we're going to deliver this kind of housing for everybody, and we're going to provide this kind of healthcare for everybody, and this kind of education, and this kind of communication. And then what quickly happens is large numbers of people say, I don't want that. I don't like that. It doesn't work for me or whatever. And so, one of the it's a pesky problem, but it's very revealing, it's very illuminating. Wherever you find central planning in communist tyrannies like the Soviet Union or China or other places, wherever you find it, you know what you also always find? Black markets. You always find large networks of black markets because the people continue to trade, they continue to provide value for each other. They just do it illegally outside the scope of the law because the law
Right.
won't let them do these things. So nobody is the problem is not that Joe Biden is too stupid, and if only we had a smarter person to manage the whole economy, then it would be. That's a progressive myth. That's the temptation or the seduction of progressivism. If we can just maybe if we just had Anthony Fauci, he's really smart. He's a physician. He has an MD, right? Maybe he should manage the whole economy. No, because Anthony Fauci can't know what I need right now. And whatever I need and want and value right now, it might change in a heartbeat. I could, something could happen to me in the next hour and what I value all of a sudden changes. And there's no way Anthony Fauci can know that about millions of people.
You talk about that, and I'm going to take it a step further. They, I believe, know that they can't know what people want, nor do I think they care to know what people want. We have reached a point, and I think this is the foundation of progressivism. We have reached a point where they have realized we can't know what everybody wants. We can't know what's actually best for everybody. We're going to tell people what they want. We're going to tell people what's best for them. And that's why
Yeah.
we get into situations like we have now with gas prices, right? This is not a result of people want lower gas prices. I think almost universally, the vast majority of Americans want lower gas prices. I don't think anybody's going to push back on me. Now, I think there's probably a 10 to 20% group of the population who are so enamored and so obsessed with we have to solve the quote unquote man-made climate change crisis that
Right.
gas
Right.
prices
Right.
should be as high as possible. $5.90, $6 a gallon is too low. We should be paying
Right.
$10, $20, $50 a gallon because we should be using as little as possible. Now, a lot of those 10 or 20% are in a certain class of people who are paying a fortune for their private jets, and it doesn't seem to matter to them how much they use.
Right.
But at the end of the day, that group, they want to tell us what's best for you is you need to stop driving, and you especially need to stop driving fossil fuel powered, coal powered, oil powered, natural gas powered vehicles. You need to be driving an electric car, and they somehow think I read an article the other day that said, I don't know why this needs to be said, but apparently it does. Batteries don't generate power. Batteries merely store power created by fossil fuels. But this whole push towards electric vehicles, which we could start getting into the whole conversation about cronyism and everything else, but this is by design. This is the government telling the state, telling us, here's what you should want. Forget what you do want. It doesn't matter what you do want. This is what you should want. You should want electric vehicles powered by vast wind farms and solar farms and whatever else it might be. That's what's in your best interest. So we're going to give that to
Yep.
you whether you like it or not.
And you'll notice progressives they'll change their messaging based on the particular subject and situation. In the case of like cars, right? They're very clear. You should want electric cars, and if you don't, you're immoral and you're stupid and you're probably stinky, right? And we just don't like you. In other cases, what they'll do is they'll speak in very ambiguous terms that allows everybody to sort of read into these terms whatever they want. A great example is in the realm of education. They'll say we need to provide quality education for
Right.
everybody, for all children. Now people
Right.
hear that, right? And they think, well, yeah, I want quality education for my children. Of course, everybody wants quality. Well, now what they don't do is they don't define what quality means. And
Right.
anybody who's tried to teach kids, in fact, anybody with kids knows that just two siblings, right, growing up in the same household, same environment, same gene pool, two siblings can have completely different learning styles. The kind of education that works for one sibling might not work very well for the others. That's just two people. Now multiply that by millions of kids all across the country. How do you teach them? And the obvious answer is there is no one best way. There isn't and there can't be. And yet, what are progressives going to do? They're going to come along and say, we have distilled this down into a methodology, a process. This is what the education bureaucrats say is the best way to provide education, and we're going to shove right all these kids into these schools, and every kid is going to sit and experience and endure the exact same kind of educational experience, whether it works for them or not. And yet the progressives will sit back and say, see, we're providing quality education for everybody when they're not for the vast majority of students. And so this is one of the great look. This is one of the central lessons that comes from studying experiments in central planning is that it's always doomed to fail. And I think you're right to point out after learning so much about the failures of central planning, for those who continue to promote it, both those in the political class, whether it's a Joe Biden or the squad in Congress or those types, or voting citizens who are just
Hmm.
advocates for it and they vote for people who support central planning. Do they really not know? Do they not know that central planning leads to these terrible results? Or do they know that it does lead to terrible results and they want the terrible results because then they can swoop in and say, oh, you're all suffering, things are terrible, we're here with the government, we're here to save you.
We're here from the government. We're here to help. Everything you were just talking about makes me think back to the book Brave New World, and it's been a long time since I've read it. So
Yeah.
I'm hoping to get it right. But I remember the very beginning when you're going through when they're starting to talk about their new model, and the first chapter is they're walking the I don't remember if it was new students or new doctors or who the class was, but there was a class going through their factory, and they were splitting atoms instead of or splitting embryos instead of into twins or triplets or quintuplets, whatever it was. Normally,
Right.
they were splitting them. They had found a way to split them into groups of, I think, 96 embryos. A single embryo they could fertilize
Right.
correctly and split into 96 identical people. And the theory was that they could then have 96 of the same exact person who then they could train to do the exact same work on the exact same machine and get the exact same output every single time. And what we know from reality, what we know from real life, I know plenty of pairs of twins alone. I mean, you're talking about siblings,
Oh yeah.
but let's get even more
Yeah.
specific to twins who
Yeah.
different skill sets, different abilities, different capabilities. Quite often, you have twins born where one of the two will end up with learning disabilities, will end up with certain disabilities just because of how things go inside the womb. I mean, it's such an imperfect, hard to predict process, and
Well, and here's the thing, even if you could control, theoretically, even if you could control for those things, here's something you can't control for. Say, take the case of twins, they're going to make different choices.
yep.
One might choose to work really hard and practice really hard at whatever he's doing, and the other might be lazy and choose to be lazy. And guess what you're going to get? You're going to get really different. They might be right identical in every physical, biological way, They might look exactly the same, but the one who chooses to work really hard and work in a very smart way and train and practice and be really efficient, that one's probably going to achieve things that the other one who chooses to be lazy isn't. And central planning, progressive central planning, there's no way to take account for those kinds of variables, which is why it's always doomed to fail.
Well, what we know is the idea, the very foundation of progressive central planning is control. And that brings us into this conversation about inflation as we've been talking about it. The big step that they're starting to take now that's going to continue to grow when we talk about control is price control. And we're
right.
seeing that in
That's
all
right.
kinds of ways. And there's an interesting battle, I think, that's going to happen as we continue to see these price control changes happening. And that battle to me is the idea of reelection versus the idea of telling people what's best for them. Does the executive office, does the executive branch decide, in order to get reelected, we're going to tell oil companies that they have to sell gas at $3 a gallon, and they're going to control that price, and they're going to be damned the supply? I mean, obviously, if you start controlling gas prices and telling them it's going to lower supply, or do you go to the higher end where you're controlling and you're saying less people are going to buy, and we're going to control it that way?
Well, hold on. Let's before you get into the sort of the political incentives here, let's just make sure that we're clear on how these we know how these go. These kinds of policies. This isn't hypothetical. The laws of economics predict what is going to happen,
Right.
and then we have history. We have all kinds of historical examples of these things actually playing out. So governments do things like they raise taxes, they manipulate the currency, they restrict, regulate, or in the case of COVID, actually shut down all kinds of productivity. And so, because of those government policies, we get an economic crisis. This was true in the 1930s and the 1940s, the Great Depression. It's true. It was true in 2008 when the housing market came crashing down. It's true today. And so you have these progressives in government. They cause the economic crisis. And I'm going to add here an argument I have challenged many. I've challenged economists, historians, all kinds of smart people to refute this if they can, and no one's ever refuted it. And that is, every economic crisis in history, everywhere, is ultimately caused by government intervention.
Yeah.
That in a truly free market situation where people are free to do with their own property and their own labor whatever they want to do, and they're free to interact and trade with whoever's willing to, that there cannot be an economic crisis. An economic crisis only happens through intervention. So we have a crisis caused by progressive government policies. And what do the progressives offer as solution? More government policies.
Right.
And they're going to come in two main forms. And just watch and see. Number one is going to be price setting. They're going to come in and they're going to say things like gas. They're going to say, no. You can't sell gas at $6 or $7. You must, by law or regulation, you must sell gas for $4 a gallon. That's called price control. The other thing that they can do is come in and say, we're going to offer subsidies. Oh, you can't afford to fill up your car? We're going to send you a check with some money or some coupons that you can use, right?
Yeah.
When you go fill gas, and the coupon will be worth $40 when you fill up your tank, something like that. And what happens with price controls, the result is always creating shortages. When in a general market situation, if I'm sitting here with some capital, I have some capital, and I've been using it to, I don't know, grow some wheat. I'm from Kansas. People grow wheat in Kansas, and that's what I've been doing with my capital. I've been buying land and planting wheat and everything that goes with it. And all of a sudden, I see the price of gasoline keeps going up and up and up, and oil and related things. I might think to myself, wow, there's an opportunity for me to make some money. I'm going to move my capital from agriculture over to oil and gas production. Be precisely out of my self-interest. I want to make some money, and I can see there's a big demand and people are willing to pay a lot. I
Let
won't
me
be the
add to
only
that.
one.
Let me add to
Yeah,
that real quick. Let's also not forget the cost of them producing their wheat is going up exponentially because they use tractors and they use
sure,
machines that run on gas. So in
sure.
that whole personal calculation, they're not only just saying, well, there's an opportunity here where I can make more money than I'm making currently, but the cost of what they're currently making is going through the roof. So
Yes.
instead, now that also plays into this whole calculation.
And so to be a successful capitalist in the real sense of this, and I don't even mean the Marxist origin of that's where the term comes from, which has always bothered me. But in a literal sense, being someone with capital and thinking, making choices. How am I going to allocate my capital? What should I do? What is the best use? What's the most value I can get from my capital? It's hard work because it requires researching all the time and trying to figure out what is it people really value, what do they value now, what are they likely to value next week, next month, next year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because some capital investments take longer than others to get a return on that investment. And so when demand goes up, prices go up in markets, capital will be reallocated to those areas where prices are going up.
Sure.
Production goes up, the supply of whatever it is, whether it's gasoline or houses or clothing or food or wherever you see an increase in prices, the supply goes up, which means very quickly the prices start to come down because there's
Mm-hmm.
more of that being produced.
Right.
And that's a very normal business cycle, right? And capitalists are always moving their capital around and investing in where they see the greatest need. When you come in and impose a price control, you say, no, we in government, we're going to tell people how much they can sell their gas or their oil for or anything else, then a whole lot of capitalists say, well, screw that. I'm not going to go invest in that area because I can't eat. It's going to cost me more to produce that thing than the government's going to let me sell it for. So I won't. And therefore the supply stays very, very, and you end up with shortages.
Yep.
And then there's just not enough gas. And that's how you end up with gas lines like in the 1970s under Jimmy Carter when he was president. And Americans would sit in line for 2 hours to get their allotted 5 gallons, for that week or that month or whatever it was. It was ridiculous. In the
Do
case of
people
subsidies,
realize? Do people realize? I mean, I want people to take a second and just think about what that means. We're used to cars today that if you have an average sedan in
yeah,
America today, you're getting somewhere 20 to 25, maybe 30, even 30 miles per gallon. Most
easily,
of the
yeah,
cars in the 1970s were getting 8 to 12. And you're
right,
getting about 5 gallons of gas. I mean, you're
right,
getting enough gas to drive about 60 miles for the week.
yeah.
Imagine the effect that has on you. And it's the opening up of markets that allowed the development of cars that allowed for longer trips on a gallon of gas and improved. It wasn't government intervention. It wasn't government going out to the car companies and saying, you have to make cars that get 30 miles to the gallon. Because at that point, why wouldn't they say you have to make cars that get 100 miles to the? I mean, the government
Right.
could say whatever they want. It takes technology, it takes ingenuity, it takes entrepreneurship, it takes a certain approach to be able to create a product that can do that for people.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the one of the great examples, perhaps the best studied examples of price controls are what progressives call price gouging. When you have some sort of emergency situation, a hurricane, a flood, a tornado, some right, people are hurting, right? It's an emergency, and they need basic necessities. They need water, and they need food, and they just need the basic necessities. And someone will show up with a big truck of bottled water, and they'll sell bottled water for $10 a bottle, and progressives cry that is price gouging. That's horrible. And so a lot of places will pass legislation and ordinances and they'll outlaw that. You can't do that. You can't sell. sell bottled water for more than they fix the price. They put a price limit on it.
Mm-hmm.
Think of what happens when there's a hurricane and millions of people are all of a sudden they're without. They don't have power, they don't have water, they need the necessities of life, and someone shows up and is able to sell water for $10 a bottle. Guess what those with capital and resources quickly do? Someone says, "Hey, I'm going to go down to that area and bring a truckload of water and sell it for $9 a bottle, and I'll sell mine first." And someone else says, "Well, I'll show up and sell my bottled water for $5 a bottle, and people will buy mine," right? And out of sheer competition, right, supply goes up and prices come down. When the government steps in and says, no price gouging, you can't charge what you want for your bottled water, then a whole lot of people say, I was going to drive a truck full of bottled water down there, but I can't make any money on it, so it's not worth my time. I'm not actually going to do it. In the case of subsidies, this is happening right here in Colorado. The mayor of Denver gave a speech not too long ago, and he said there's an emergency. Dave, you may not know this. You've been gone. You're sitting there in Nashville, Tennessee right now, but there is an emergency here in Denver about affordable housing. There's an affordable housing emergency. There's not enough affordable housing, according to our progressive Democrat mayor of Denver.
Yep.
And what's the solution? Take a guess what the solution is. Subsidies. We need another government program, another government intervention. Now, this isn't all, a big part of the reason we don't have any affordable housing is because we don't have much housing, period. It's very difficult to build a house because building houses is so regulated and so restricted. The smart thing to do, if these people knew anything about economics, would be, well, get rid of the restrictions, get rid of the regulations, let people build houses. And all of a sudden, the supply of houses would go up. There'd be more houses for sale, which means the price of housing would come down. That won't even register. It won't even be on the radar screen. They'll say, hey, people have a civil right to affordable housing, and therefore government should tax some people, take money from some people, and offer it as a housing subsidy to those who don't have much money.
Well, there's two things specifically about Denver that I think are worth talking about. One is specifically about Denver. One is more in general. You talk about those regulations, and you talk about all of those requirements. There's also regulations that restrict where and what type of housing you can build in certain areas. There's a for example, a regulation that says you cannot block the view of the mountains from any city park in the city and county of Denver, Colorado. So you have to be able to see the mountains if it's a city park, which means if somebody wants to build a condo 6 blocks away, a condo building, it can't be over a certain height because it can't block the view of the mountains from that park. So you're restricting the ability to actually build. And the best example of that is actually in Boulder, Colorado. In Boulder, Colorado, in the downtown district, it is illegal, other than I think 2 or 3 buildings that were grandfathered in. It is illegal to build a building over 4 stories tall. So you just simply can't get enough property. The other problem, though, is this idea that everybody has a right to live in whatever city they want to, no matter the cost. Why should somebody have a right to live in Denver, Colorado, in the county of Denver? Nobody's saying those people can't go move to one of the suburbs, go move to Arvada, Aurora, Douglas County, go move to Thornton. You're still in the Denver metro area. You can still get around. You still have access to all of the things you want. And there are cheaper housing options outside of the city of Denver. And we have this assumption, or the progressives have this assumption, that it's some right to get to live in the city of Denver, and we therefore have to provide housing that is cost effective, when in reality there's only so much land out there, and if somebody wants to live there, they're going to have to pay for the value of that land.
Yeah, so look where we are here. We are experiencing an acute financial crisis, economic crisis. In fact, that term doesn't even capture everything, because that word economic in the phrase economic crisis makes it sound kind of abstract, kind of like it's just something to be studied and experienced by economists. But what is going on right now is affecting real people in really big, powerful, awful, terrible ways.
Yep.
They're hurting. The cost of their medicines are going up at the same time the cost of their food is going up, and the cost of their rent is going up, or their mortgage payments. Maybe their actual mortgage didn't go up, but the property taxes went up, and so it's all bundled together in their house payment, and they just can't do it, right? And they're scared. They're not sure what to do, and these pains that we are suffering right now, these are the direct result of progressive policies that require government intervention into transaction, into human productivity, into the way people operate their business and whether they operate it or not. And the only thing we're going to hear from the chattering progressive political class is more of the same thing, more intervention, more government policies. And for those wondering, well, what is the answer? The answer is stop, stop, stop restricting people, stop regulating them, stop subsidizing them, stop controlling prices, stop controlling productivity, just stop controlling other people. Make sure that people are not being robbed, that they're not being raped, they're not being murdered. Make sure that they're secure in their person and their property. That's it.
Yep.
Shut up and sit down. You in government, shut up and sit down and get out of our way and let people do what they want to do. And those who see a shortage of housing, they'll build houses. And those who see a shortage of oil and gas, they'll drill. Let people drill. Let people refine oil into gasoline. Let them make the things that people desperately want. That's the solution. And we don't get that. We will not get that unless we return to a model of good governance, a model of the proper purpose of government. And Dave, that when we look through the history of the world, if someone says, I want to know more about what good government is, what even if no government has been perfect, are there a set of ideas out there? Are there a set of principles that can help us understand what government should do, what government should not do? And the answer is, yeah, there's a great example in our own founding.
Right.
That moment of the American founding sort of put a spotlight, unlike any episode in all of human history. It put a spotlight on the idea of what a good government is, a legitimate government that actually protects property, protects individual liberty, and as well as the civic virtues, the kind of individual responsibility, the self-restraint, the self-assertion that free citizens need to exercise. That is on display in the American founding. They talked about it, they lived it to a large extent, and it's right there for us to learn from. And we started this by talking about this great event that we have coming. The reason you're sitting in Nashville right now is to make sure that everything's in order for July 28th, when we're going to get up on a stage with Ben Carson. And this is the whole theme of that show, is recovering, reclaiming, rediscovering those ideas, those principles in the American founding, remembering what good government is, not merely as some abstract, civic lesson or history lesson, but because we want better lives. We're tired of suffering under the weight of progressive central planning. We want to prosper. We want to live free. We want to be happy and healthy, and we want our kids to have a better life than we had. And that's not going to happen unless we reclaim a big realm of individual freedom. And that's what that show is going to be about on July 28th.
I think you used a really important word in that, and that word is prosperity, to prosper. And we talked a little bit earlier about the ideas of Marxism. Marxism is it's the opposite of prosperity. It's a bunch of people living on the bare necessities of what they live, what they can, even in its perfect form. If Marxism was to be achieved, nobody lives well, nobody prospers. They live on the bare minimum, and in reality, that's the theoretical. The reality is most people don't live at all. A lot of people end up not living. They end up dying of not having what they need because there's nobody there to provide it. And the American idea, this whole idea that we advocate for, that we love, that we talk about when we talk about the founding, is this idea of people being able to prosper. And you talk about that quite a bit. Is you look at that chart of wealth in this world, and it wasn't until 1776 when prosperity, when individual wealth, when individual property just skyrocketed because we finally recognized that people can live better lives. And that's the America we need to rediscover. That's the country you and I love, and we want everybody to fall in love with again.
There's a term of art that is widely used, it's common, it's popular among Marxist activists, real Marxists, people in places like Ethiopia and Cuba that fight in China that fought to transform their nations into bastions of communism. And that term is struggle. For Marxists, that living in desperate poverty and foregoing all the goods, barely having enough food and water to live, that struggle, that suffering in the cause of creating a Marxist utopia, they see that as something noble, as something to, they wear it like they talk about their struggle and their suffering as if that earns them some reward or award. And the American view is very different. I mean, certainly the Americans don't in any way downplay the idea of work and productivity. You have to work and be productive, but we don't look forward to suffering. We don't say it's a right, like that's something to pray for, that we get to suffer and struggle. We would like to be productive and create more wealth so that life for ourselves and our kids and grandkids are a little better, a little easier. Things are a little more convenient. We have more choices in the world. That's the American way. And I think this is a key question Americans should ask themselves. Do you want to look at the future in a communist Marxist, in a Russian way, in a Leninist way, in a Nazi way, in a fascist way? Do you want to pride yourself on suffering and struggling and starving to death? Is that a goal, something you want in your life? If you do, keep supporting progressivism. You'll get it. Lots of struggles and lots of suffering will be coming your way. If you want to prosper, if you want more good things, if you want more choices, if you want more resources, if you want to know that you're going to have enough food to eat tomorrow and access to clean water to drink, then help us reclaim and rediscover those ideas of liberty. And a great place to start is July 28th.
Yeah.
Put it on your calendar, July 28th in Nashville, Tennessee. And keep track here of what we're doing at the Vino and Veritas Society, because we're going to be broadcasting all the details very soon.
Absolutely. Well, we will. This event will be yet one more way we continue to defend the American idea, to guard the American idea. It's not a one-day thing. We will be doing it ongoing and continue then. But that's going to be a night about guarding, presenting, reclaiming, rediscovering the American idea. And I for one, I really can't wait.
Dave, let me ask you a question some of our members are going to ask. Is this the kind of thing worth traveling for? If someone lives in Colorado or on the East Coast or down in Florida, is it worth a plane trip or a car trip and a hotel room to come to this?
Look, we believe in free markets. It's up for everybody to decide. But I'll tell you what, I'm excited. I am ecstatic. I keep looking out the door here. I'm sitting in this green room where you're going to be sitting and getting prepped and thinking about the space outside. I hope nobody can hear the banging going on out there. They're setting up for a show tonight. This is actually a venue they film major concerts for television in. This is going to be a really cool space and something that nobody's ever seen before. I don't think anybody's ever seen what we're about, the type of show we're about to put on.
and we're going to put my big mug up on that stage.
Up on that stage and potentially on 3 massive screens surrounding it.
That's a terrifying thought. But I will make this promise. I will promise everybody listening, I will do my best to put on a great show, a fun show.
It's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait. I'm going to be here for those who are looking to catch up with me. I'm going to be in the Midwest working on this for the next 7 weeks. I'm planning on staying here, meeting with as many people as I can, and getting us organized and getting this thing ready to go, because this is going to be a game changer for America. I hope. I look forward to this being a moment where we change the entire conversation of how America talks about what the American idea was all about, and what it takes to rediscover, reclaim, and guard it into the future.
If this show goes well, if we get a lot of people turned out, and we have a great time, everyone has a good time. Let me put it in market terms. If it turns out there's demand for this thing and people value it, we're going to go perform this show in many cities. And as we go around the country talking about what really does make America great, what is best about American, let's reclaim that. At that point, we don't have to go try to get attention from major media and other influencers like that. They're going to come to us. They're going to send their report. They're going to try to figure out what is going on. Why are these groups of people showing up in theaters, right, to engage in these live performances about the beauty of the American idea.
So are you suggesting that our listeners should tell their friends and family across the country that, hey, you should get excited about this and get involved in this? The more people we can get here, the more excitement we can generate, the better this is going to be for all of us, and the better it's going to be for the country. It's going to help us continue to fuel our mission.
July 28th. It'll be in the evening. Put it on your calendar, please, and start thinking about how to be in Nashville, Tennessee that evening.
Absolutely. Until then, Tom, no sumus custodes, and keep everything under control in Denver. I'll do the same out here in the am I in the central, in the Midwest? Am I in the South? I don't even know where I am anymore, but I'll keep moving around and keep doing what I can.
Actually, we're going to talk about that in a later podcast, because the whole concept of the Midwest kept moving throughout American history, and so it's a great discussion to have. But you take care of Tennessee, okay?
Look forward to it. Absolutely. Till next time, no sumus custodes.